New tonight, an exhibit centered around grief opened up in Springfield. Colors of Grief showcases artwork created by both youth and adult participants of Rick's Place. Artists were encouraged to reflect on their emotional journeys and dig into how these experiences have left a permanent mark. We spoke with Becky Flores, the program director for Rick's Place, about how these feelings translate into masterpieces.
The goal or the prompt for families was think about what your grief means to you. What does it look like? What color would it be? Think of a memory, something that inspires you about what your grief experience has been like, and then they just put those feelings onto canvas, onto paper, in whatever way spoke to them. And so these pieces are all so different, they're all so unique, but they all share a universal message.
Rick's Place is a free peer grief program located on site and inside local schools, aimed at helping those aged 5 to 18 who have experienced death. Still ahead on Western Mass News, you may not be able to rock around the Christmas tree due to recent weather conditions. We'll hear from a local farm on how the dry conditions are impacting businesses after